Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and today we'll be ranking the Dream Eaters in my scenario tier list. I really like this campaign. It's one of my favorite campaigns, definitely in the top 3, with Forgotten Age and Carcosa. And I'm gonna give a spoiler, the reason ranking today is only beneath good and we're not beneath fine or bad or don't, is because this campaign, part of why it ranks so highly is it has no scenario ranking that lowly. So I'm just be zoomed in on the top half of the tier list instead. This campaign does have problems. Website especially feels a little bit outdated. It has a lot of little things like shuffling in Doom cards, or a scenario card where you draw it and it says test fist or you cannot move, you cannot progress, and if you can't do that, the game just locks. There's a lot of little things like that hold this campaign down, but on the whole, it's excellent and one of my favorites. We're gonna go through chronologically the order I played it in, and Beyond the Gates of Sleep is the first scenario in Dreamside. It is, in my opinion, the most linear scenario in Arkham Horror. Yes, even tied with the Arkham Express. Because the fact is, it's just a straight line. It ends in a spokes of a wheel sort of scenario with some random connections, but you just go to one, come back, go to the next, come back, so on and so forth. It's just a straight line. Thematically, it really hits the nail on the head. It feels like what it should. Mechanically, there's some interesting enemies and it introduces you to live encounter cards, but on the whole, it's a very linear, basic introduction to the campaign and its mechanics, and I don't have a very fond opinion of it, but I still put it, I think, above the Essex County Express. It's on the low end of good, but I think it is still good. Waking Nightmare is the introduction to Webside, and it's a scenario I'm super conflicted about, because on the one hand, thematically and mechanically, I love this scenario. It has so much going for it in terms of exploring the hospital, and in terms of like, it nails its thematics. The Suspicious Orderly, that card is wonderful. But then, on the other hand, it has that encounter card where you find out that this campaign, just features a card where you test fist or you can't progress. And then, furthermore, it has a final objective that says do a test 1, then a test 2, then a test 3, and 3 different stats. If you fail any of them, you don't progress the act. And you have to have a way to get through that. And again, it's just like an awkward thing that can sort of be a weird wall to progression. It's not the hardest numbers. If it were high numbers, it would not be making it into good. It would actually be in maybe low fine if the numbers were more problematically high. But it does rub me the wrong way a lot. The thing that really messes it up for me is that I think it scales badly with player count. The fact you have to walk through so many locations and then backtrack through them and then spend an action to remove the doom, it's really bad player scaling. And I think the player scaling combined with all its other faults are enough to just barely prevent me from placing it in very good. It has too many things that are wrong with it for me to unambiguously praise it. It's gotta stay down in good. Next we have the Search for Kadath, and it's a great degrees of completion scenario. It also sort of recontextualizes what an action is in Arkham, because you're exploring continents. A move action in this is not the same as a move action in the Essex County Express. And this one, you sail from the boats and explore a mountain in an adjacent region, and this one you move one train car. This has a very different scale than a scenario like Essex County Express, and sort of a scale that's otherwise not seen. Maybe like in the War of the Outer Gods, it kind of is. It's definitely going straight to the top, right? Like it's gonna hang out near Threads of Fate, because it occupies a very similar space to Threads of Fate, and thematically I like it much more than Threads of Fate. I can't, off the top of my head, name a single encounter card from Threads of Fate, but I will never not be able to name Song of the Maja Bird. I know that card. I hate that card. Same with Wondrous Lands. There's a lot of really challenging cards in this set that make me like it a lot more. The problem is that above Threads of Fate is like a brick wall of quality. They're almost the best scenarios in the game. Ice and Death Part 1 is the hardest introduction. It has that wonderful crunch period. The Paladin Mask has Corpse Taker, which is one of my favorite enemies in the game, as well as the best randomly generated map in the entire set of Arkham Horror. City of the Elder Things doesn't deserve to be above this, or above Search for Kadath for that matter. Holy shit, Untamed Wilds that high? That ain't right. Let's move Untamed Wilds down too. Now it's right. I knew Search for Kadath should be higher, but it wasn't because it should be above these. It's because these two aren't as good as I was ranking them. Next, we have the Thousand Shapes of Horror. This is the scenario where you move the house, you do all the things, and you run down the stairwell. And every time there's a scenario where you run down at the end, it just holds it back. It's one of the better scenarios because it's shorter and you feel more threatened while you're running down. But then on the other hand, it's one of the worst ones because it has a counter card that literally just undoes your progress and wastes your time. And sure, in terms of Dreamland thematics, it fits, but I hate it all the same. I guess on the whole, I really don't like the boss of this encounter. Fighting him doesn't do anything unless your Clover is terrible at their job and can't progress the game fast enough and you have to put damage on it. The fact that it's a mandatory head test on top of getting hit by it when it's in its massive retaliate state means that you basically have to get ahead of it. Like if it's actually at the same location as you and you're not able to evade it, you're basically just failing, right? Like it's just killing you. It doesn't actually feel like fighting it is an option, and I really dislike unkillable bosses where you're not supposed to fight them. Like if it's unkillable, don't give me the pretense that I'm supposed to be hitting it, that I should be putting damage on it. That rubs me the wrong way as a mechanic. Outside of that, it's a pretty basic scenario, and my version, hilariously, I never drew a ghoul, so just nothing was in the graveyard, which is apparently a thing that happens at low player counts. And again, that sort of led into my feeling that there's not great player scaling throughout this campaign. It's notably worse than Waking Nightmare. I think I might put it... I don't like putting it above Alive in the Fog, even. I think it deserves to live somewhere in the middle of good. The gameplay flow of it, when you're like Clover's running around and your fighter is setting up to deal with the boss and you're trying to figure out how you're going to evade this, like it has some good stuff going for it. And then I have to remember to rank the second half where you run down the stairwell, don't I? Oh, that does hold it down a lot. I think it's... Is it worse than Beyond the Gates of Sleep? It's pretty close. I'm gonna put it at the very bottom of my good tier. It's pretty close to falling into fine because I just really dislike that second half. Next up, we have Dark Side of the Moon. Dark Side of the Moon is a scenario where the first time I played it, I thought it was pretty good, and then I'd probably start liking it less and less because it's actually just a straight line. It's a straight line beginning to end, except at the very start it looks like a circle, and if you walk the wrong way, you lose several turns. It's really just a straight line, and that linearity is definitely the worst aspect of Dark Side of the Moon. But that linearity lets it turn into a really awesome chase sequence with the crazy threatening enemies that you might not be dealing with well, especially if you got captured. And it also lets it turn into a chase sequence with enemies you're supposed to ignore, like the Moon Byaku's. So even though it's like super linear, and that is a problem, everything else about the scenario has grown on me every time I played it, and I absolutely love Dark Side of the Moon. It's not going below very good. The stuff at the end where your alarm levels can get out of hand, you get to the end, it's like, do a foot test. And some characters just can't. And it's like, all right, you can do a book test instead. And Zoe's like just looking at the captain, like, is my stat line a joke to you? I'll go kill myself. Apparently that's my only choice. Like that can feel really bad. And the linearity is a little bit not great. But aside from those two issues, and your teammates can help to some degree with that, and also like if you just completely fail to reduce your alarm level, you failed the core mechanic of the scenario, so you should die. And the fact that Arkham doesn't do that more is kind of weird. I think it gets to be in my great tier. I really, really like this. I like it more than I like playing Midnight Mass. I look forward to playing this scenario. It's not high in my great tier, but I think it's decidedly better than the stuff I've ranked in very good. I really, really enjoy playing Dark Side of the Moon. Point of No Return is a scenario I might rank higher if Ghoul Gang had ever actually shown up, but so far the highest number of ghouls I've ever seen under Pikmin was 1. In my playthrough on the channel, I got 0. Much like how I never drew any ghouls to spawn in the graveyard in the previous scenario, I never drew any ghouls to put under Pikmin in this one. I like pretty much everything about the scenario though. I really enjoy the thematics with the ghouls and the gugs. I enjoy going up to find a path into the forest that the other people were in. I enjoy going down to different things. I enjoy the way the scenario scales with damage on the card, and that one treachery that gets worse the later location you're in. I think generally speaking, the gameplay flow of Point of No Return is really cool. And the fact that Ghoul Gang never works is sad, but like I can also see the world where you're playing in a 4-player team and Ghoul Gang goes the fuck off. I think if I'd ever seen Ghoul Gang happen a single time, I'd probably be putting this in great. But because I'm so aware that Ghoul Gang might just not happen, I think I'm gonna use Point of No Return as... Dead Heat and Tattered Emolion are really good. And even though I'm not thinking Turn Back Time and Doom are great right now, it's just been too long since I played Forgotten Age. I know they're better than I'm giving them credit for in this moment. I'm gonna put it... The sheer catharsis of just killing the snakes and not caring about vengeance, I'm gonna put it beneath Turn Back Time, but above Doom. I think Turn Back Time is better than Doom because of the catharsis of just not caring, and because it has a huge boss fight, too, in fact, because the Harbinger's there as well. I think Point of No Return is held down by the lack of Ghoul Gang. Every time I'm like, yeah, it's time for Ghoul Gang, and then nothing, nobody. And that holds it back a lot. Next, we got Where the Godspell, and let's not beat around the bush, it's going straight to the top. The question is just where. I love Where the Gods Dwell. First of all, a common complaint I have about campaigns not having good finales, I had this with Scarlet Keys, is there simply aren't enough threatening enemies. In Forgotten Age, they just like throw in crazy huge enemies in the encounter deck, and in Where the Gods Dwell, they do the same thing, and that really helps. Depths of Yoth might be a worse scenario if it didn't just like throw a random giant fish in the game, if it didn't spawn a massive old one. There are lots of things in that scenario deck making the encounters harder. Where the Gods Dwell has the Wandering Dole. It has, I think, 3 copies of Lyre without a face, and I think there's another enemy that I'm forgetting right now. No, it's just the High Priest not to be described, and I guess he is a boss enemy, so he does sort of count. But the High Priest is all that it is. So in the encounter deck, you have these 3 Lyres with no face, you have the Dole of the Waste, and then you have a very early boss and High Priest not to be described, before the eventual showdown with Mega Nyarlathotep. There's just a lot of threatening enemies in here. There's also some absolutely horrifying cards. Where is it? I hate this card so much. You have to plan around this. There we go. Abandoned by the Gods. This is unambiguously one of the scariest Mythos cards in the entire game. It's terrifying. This is a scenario where, because this is Peril, you as a group of players need to be like yelling out, hey, I'm not safe to discard this number. I need to keep this number. Because somebody's gonna eventually auto-fail this and have to discard a lot of cards from your team. This thing is terrifying. But I really like how difficult Where the Gods Dwell is. I like how hard Mega Nyarlathotep is. Like, yeah, in my experience outside of my playthrough on the channel, I've been thinking the Doom Clock was a bit too tight and it wasn't necessarily greatly designed. But all the same, I do really like having a scenario where the Doom Clock feels like it matters and I feel pressured to go fast. I like having an optional in-game boss that's incredibly difficult. I like it more than Starfall because of its difficulty, and God, I almost like it more than Depths of Yoth. Where the Gods Dwell is legitimately one of my favorite scenarios. I think you can be in situations where you're sort of fumbling and struggling to deal with the test and just like drawing and handing encounter cards around for a while. It can be kind of unfun. I've definitely had playthroughs where I just like stopped doing things and I drew encounter cards and handed them out, and that's all I got to do. And that does sort of wear it down a little bit. I really like the payoff for the Evidence of Gaddath that you found, where it massively saves you time and gets you closer to beating Mega Nyarlathotep by saving you multiple turns potentially. I can't quite put Where the Gods Dwell above a Depths of Yoth. That scenario is just a fantastic scenario, one of the hardest and most interesting scenarios in the game in my opinion. And I think Where the Gods Dwell is a little bit too linear and too short to really beat something like that. I don't know, thematically I think I actually like Where the Gods Dwell as much as Starfall. Because thematically, right? The Lyre with no face is also Nyarlathotep. The only enemies here you encounter that aren't Nyarlathotep are the cultist worshipping him and a Dole, because like, the fuck are you gonna do? Tell the Dole to not be here? It's the Dreamlands, he goes where he wills. And then when you get to the end and you're just like trying to manage Nyarlathotep, and it kind of just feels like he's fucking with you, like all of this is just nonsense, and if you talk about him, you instantly die, because let's be real, if he wanted to kill you, he could. Like, thematically, Nyarlathotep just fucking with you is the entire scenario. In fact, it's the whole campaign. There's no reason for you to have to deal with Atlag-Nakah. Like, that's just some irrelevant stuff that's going on that Nyarlathotep is like, look, dude, you're not to go kill that spider. I don't make the rules, I'm leaving. And it's like, oh, all right, cool, I guess I'm fighting a spider god now, thanks for that. The entire other campaign, like at least Atlag-Nakah was there and a problem before Nyarlathotep. Everything you do in the other campaign is just Randolph Carter, also known as Nyarlathotep, fucking with you, until the final scenario when basically all the enemies are him. If you talk about him, he kills you because it's not allowed for you to realize this. And then you're just like jumping through nonsense hoops that don't make any sense because he thinks it's funny. And yeah, I actually think I like the thematics of Where the Gods Dwell more than Starfall. And that is what's really going to get it above Depths of Yoth, because Depths of Yoth is just a dungeon crawl, right? Thematically, Where the Gods Dwell might actually be my favorite scenario in Arkham Horror, because it somehow perfectly nails the idea of Nyarlathotep just trolling the shit out of you, which is like the one ancient one that's allowed to do that. Which leaves us with the problem child of the group, it's We Are the Cosmos. We Are the Cosmos is awesome. For a scenario defined by a rotating spider god, you'd expect this to be a mess. It's somehow mechanically pretty intuitive. The worst part of it is remembering that you do the spider rotation before you count the doom. I usually like draw my encounter cards and then I'm like, oh yeah, rotate the god. Aside from that, mechanically, the worst part of the scenario is the stuff that's a constant in the campaign. You have Ancient Evils, you have Endless Weaving dropping Doom on locations that never goes away, and every time you advance the agenda, you shuffle the deck immediately, getting you more random Doom. How much the Spider God rotates, and therefore where the objective is random and uncontrollable, and there is no means by which you can control or predict it. Well, you can predict it by math. You can say, on average, it's going to roll a 2, so if I am 2 locations clockwise from what I want to do, it will probably move to me, or at least close to me. But that's not actually good enough, because it can roll 0 or 4 and just not move, or move so far away that it's not actually helpful. It's really frustrating in terms of that randomness. And other than that, I love the scenario. When I played it, I didn't draw any Grey Weavers, and I basically never had to deal with the web spinners, because I got really, really good RNG. But like, there's a lot of really threatening enemies in there. There's just big boss enemies. There's just threatening spiders. Part of what makes, where did I end up putting it? Part of what makes Waking Nightmare want to be higher than this is that Grey Weaver is just a terrifying enemy. That's like a scenario 3 or 4 enemy, and it's just in scenario 1. It's in the finale, and it feels like it should be. It's crazy strong for scenario 1 enemy. There's a lot that's difficult in good ways in Weaver the Cosmos, but like, it doesn't deal damage to you. Which, when you're playing a Tommy, it's really, really weird how much these cards don't deal damage. It's got so much random Doom. I like the scenario. Thematically, like, coming back to how much themes matter to me, ripping the legs off of the Spider God until it finally notices you're there and starts trying to kill you, that's really cool. I really like that. I think I'm gonna put it at the very top of A tier. I really like the scenario. A Return 2 could boost this thing up to like Starfall and Double Reap tier, right? But the mechanical problems, the very random amount of Doom, and the fact that there are that 3 fist test that you get, where it's just like, if you don't do this, you can't move, and it's like, oh, but I have to move for the entire scenario. Like, the soft lock and the volatility, there are so many little things that really bother me. I can't say it's great, but it's why. It is the pinnacle of why I am upset that Return to Dream Eaters isn't getting printed, because it could be one of the best scenarios in the game, and presently it isn't. But yeah, on the whole, Dream Eaters is a fantastic campaign. The worst part about Dream Eaters is that a lot of people really dislike being told they have to make 2 decks. For the longest time, I was in the same boat. I'm at the point where I've spent far too much of my life playing this game, and if you tell me to build 2 decks, I'm like, yeah! I get to test twice as many things. But there was a long time where I was like, oh my god, I'm just trying to figure out how rogues work. You want me to play 2 of them? Oh man, oh, that's not good. Can I suffer less? I'm gonna play a Seeker and just like run Magnifying Glass, because that's a good card. I'm not gonna think about it. And a lot of people feel that way. It's too much to think about upgrading 2 decks, and you're just gonna play either 2 very similar characters or 1 brain-dead simple character you already know. For me, I view it as an upside at this point, but it's really kind of a mess, especially in real life. In real life, with 1 collection, it's a nightmare. But on Tabletop Sim, with a lot of experience in the game where I am presently, it's not a downside, it's an upside for me. So going back through it, Beyond the Gates of Sleep is good. It's overly linear, it's not got anything particularly going for it, but I do look forward to playing it even though it's not particularly amazing. Oh, apparently I skipped one. 1,000 Shapes of Horror barely gets to be in good tier, because I keep expecting it to be around Strange Moons and Light in the Fog, but then the ending just weighs it down. It's perfectly fine, but it has a boss that you're not supposed to kill where it's pretending killing it does something, and then it's got the awful chase sequence at the end. It is a great example of a scenario that would be much improved by a Return 2. Going up to Waking Nightmare, this scenario is again way better with Return 2. There's just a bunch of little things. Grey Weavers feeling really, really strong, but nothing in the scenario helping you fight them in scenario 1. The 3 fist test to be able to do anything. Like, a thing that will actually happen to you if you play Luke in this campaign. Luke will teleport somewhere to go flex because he's a Luke, and then he'll get stuck there and no one's with him. And he's like, alright, I'm gonna test 3 foot to this repeatedly. Oh no, that's a different card. It's just 3 fist for that one. Yeah, Luke can't get out. Because it's not when you move to a connecting location even. It's when you leave. So if Luke tries to go to his happy place, he gets stuck in the web, just like you can fall through the ice in Ice and Death. You can get stuck in the web and not be able to go to the Dreamlands as Luke. Also, playing Luke in the Waking side just sounds thematically really funny. But yeah, with Waking Nightmare, it's just there are too many little situations where I feel like I get stuck and I have a chance to progress, and if I fail like the first or even second skill test, I'm just like, alright, I'm testing up 1 till I'm allowed to move. That's what really holds Waking Nightmare down for me. It is the scenario that is the worst player scaled in this entire campaign as well. It is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I believe 8 location a map that you have to backtrack through all of, so it's essentially 16 locations worth of move actions, and then you have an objective that's going to be like 6 to 8 actions to do. It's player scaled very, very poorly. And all of that adds up to hold it out a very good. Then we move up quite a ways for Point of No Return. I just really like this scenario. Mechanically, the play pattern it has is very, very solid. If Ghoul Gang actually reliably went off, this would be in my great tier. Probably low in it around place Dark Side of the Moon is, but it's still a very good scenario. It's very fun to play. It has a lot interesting thematically. Weaver of the Cosmos has a lot of the same stuff going on, except it's honestly more interesting thematically and better play patterns. But it feels super, super random in very unpleasant ways. Like, I won in 30 minutes flat, but I could have imagined losing in like 40 minutes flat and feeling like I had no way to counterplay it. I feel like Weaver of the Cosmos might be the most random scenario in the entire catalog, and anything. No, that's not true, because like fundamentally there are more random scenarios. I love The Last King, but no, because it's how much progress you get. This is whether or not you win the campaign or die. Like, Weaver of the Cosmos is random in a really unpleasant way, and that's what holds it down. This could have been so much better than it was, and every time I play it, what I dislike about it gets worse, and what I like about it gets less. Dark Side of the Moon's linear as hell, but it's also just like kinda sick. It has a lot of good play patterns, a lot of interesting problems, a lot of threatening enemies. The alarm mechanic's pretty well executed, and the fact that, yeah, Zoe Samaras just sort of gets killed by the captain, that's unfortunate. But, like, play around the alarm mechanic. If you can't, then you can't do the scenario, and that's, like, your character failed. You're trying to escape, your character sounded the alarm at every turn, you're going to get caught and die, that's the only rational solution. It feels bad, and the linearity also feels bad, but the actual play pattern of the scenario of running for your life and trying to get through these high shroud locations and these dangerous enemies, or away from them, as is often the case, it's all really solid. I really like playing Dark Side of the Moon, and I always look forward to it. And it's the same boat for the Search for Kadath. The Search for Kadath is a fantastic degrees of completion scenario. I do wish that the 4th area, I believe it's the Timeless Lands, wasn't just a trap. You go there last, and if you get anything, you did incredibly well. Because if you go there any time before then, it's just going to waste your time. It's far slower to complete than all of the others. And also, it's the longest to backtrack out of, where you're getting nothing and just wasting time. So as a result, if you are going there, it's with a team that's demolishing everything, and you're not going to resign. You somehow got 10 evidence. That's how you're going to go there and search for Kadath. And like, I don't know that that team exists. Search for Kadath doesn't let you full complete it. Maybe if you played like Amanda, Rex, and Tony, you'd get through it, right? Like some of the best clue getters in the game with a hyper efficient fighter to protect them. But even then, I don't know. Maybe a Harvey instead of a Rex, somebody who can carry their own on fighting while getting clues. It's a really good scenario. I enjoy this every time I play it. It has some really unique encounter cards that are terrifying in addition to its threatening enemies. It's just a great scenario. I really enjoy everything about it. And then we have Where the Gods Dwell, which to my surprise is at the very top. I was originally thinking I'd put it above or below Starfall, but thematically, I didn't realize just how much of this scenario was Nyarlathotep. It didn't parse for me that the liar with no face is obviously also him, and that you dying when you say his name is him getting upset with you because you're not playing the game he wants you to. He wants you to do this stupid rigmarole where you talk in riddles and code to each other and you pass cards around because he thinks it's funny. The only enemy not associated with him in the entire area is just a Dole, because it's the Dreamlands. You don't control where Doles go. Everything about Where the Gods Dwell is thematically really on point, and until I had to review the scenario and explain things, it never clicked for me, because it's thematically on point in really subtle, fantastic ways. And yeah, it deserves its spot at the top of my list, and it does break my heart a little bit because it does mean Starfall is going to end up being not in my top 3. But hey, being in the top 5 with Double Reef is still pretty solid. Dim Carcosa, Unspeakable Oath, I have some really good scenarios that people view as their favorites in the game that aren't making my top 5. Starfall still gets to be very, very high. Anyways, that's it for now. I've been Rather Incoherent. This has been my impromptu review of the scenarios in the Dream Eaters. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, comment, subscribe. All that stuff really does help the channel grow. And post in the comments and tell me what you're angriest about not getting Return to Dream Eaters for. I want to know. I'm sure there are countless reasons. For me, it's Scenario 1. It's Waking Nightmare's problems that are repeated in Weaver the Cosmos. It's shuffling random doom. It's hard locks on that treachery. It's take this mythos test, this specific series of skill tests, or don't progress the act. It's all the little things that just feel like, compared to modern campaigns, it feels amateur hour. It feels like the things I'd point out while commenting on a playtest of a custom campaign. And it breaks my heart, because the scenarios in Webside could be some of the best in the game, and they just aren't. I won't put Waking Nightmare and Weaver the Cosmos up so much higher than they are. Anyways, that's it for now. See you in the next one.